episode of The Scoop on SoTL. This podcast aims to build a culture of scholarship of teaching and learning in higher education, with a specific focus on transitional pedagogy, innovation, and block mode. Scholarship of teaching and learning is more colloquially known as SoTL. In contemporary university environments, good teaching alone is not enough. More and more often, academics are being asked to provide evidence of teaching and learning outcomes. But what does that look like in reality? Sure, it can involve formalised original research, but on the ground level, it involves making transparent how we make learning possible. This involves reflection, inquiry, evaluation, and communication. And that is what we are here to achieve today. My first guest for this inaugural podcast is Michelle Perra. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you for coming along.
I'm delighted. Thanks for having me.
So, Michelle, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and your role in the first year college?
Well, who I am? I've got several personas. I'm the mother of 8, grandmother of 5, but I think my most defining sense of self is myself as a teacher. And I've been teaching for several decades now, and I don't know actually what I will be when I retire because teaching is in my blood. And you asked me earlier what drew me to education. I was always going to teach. When I was 3, my mother tells me I used to sit there and do ticks. And my initial going into teaching, I said I want to do ticks. But I've been passionate about teaching because I believe teachers change lives. And so really that's the essence of who I am. And you asked me about my role in first year college. Well, I am a foot soldier here. I am a teacher, which, as I said, is how I define myself. I've written 2 units, a literacy unit and now this new unit of creative arts. I have co-written a unit for the graduate certificate in teaching, and I've taught a bit in the masters. I suppose my other self is that I'm a passionate reader and I'm really interested in literature, and my limited research has been in literature, particularly young adult Australian literature, and I've been the judge of the Children's Book Council Awards and other awards to do with young adult fiction.
Wow. Well, as you can all see, this is clearly why Michelle is a great candidate for this first episode. I think we all have many things we could learn from her. You mentioned that you've just created a new unit. Can you tell me a little bit about that unit?
Well, I love it. It's the creative arts in education, and its core belief is that creative arts needs to be a pedagogy through which we teach content. So the Australian curriculum says we have to do making and responding with each of these arts. But the main achievement, in my view, is to convince all the students in its early childhood, P-12 and education studies that the arts are a method through which we can achieve a great deal of learning. Plus, at the same time, it's really important for student wellbeing, and we've become so much more focused over the years on well-being.
Absolutely.
And doing drama and doing art is joyous, and making music is joyous. And of course, there is all this research that it improves your ability to perform in the academic areas. But coming to school and feeling joyous, and all the creative arts work on connection and belonging, and on collaboration, team building, problem solving. So I actually think it's a super important unit, and I had such a good time designing it from the blank page. It was lovely.
Oh my gosh, how exciting. That honestly sounds like a unit I would love to take. It would be a much needed great release that I think we all need right now, and I can see how it would be so rewarding. So at Victoria University, we utilise the block mode of delivery, which means we teach units one at a time for a period of 4 weeks. And this involves small classroom teaching and really active classrooms. So, Michelle, you mentioned before that you have 2 units, one about literacy and this new unit. Could you tell me what it was like designing a unit now compared to what it was like when we first implemented the block and knew nothing?
Okay, well, the emphasis is on nothing. And I don't know whether your listeners really want to hear this, but nothing. I'd only ever used an Apple computer, and I came and they said, here's your PC. I'm thinking, where's the on button?
I feel that.
From the beginning, I had no idea. I could not turn on the computer. They said, go and ask the SAS. I'm thinking, what's a SAS? And how do I know who is a SAS and who's a staff member? Because we were all new. So it was actually fraught with difficulty, and plus they gave me a unit about which I knew very little. So there were lots of struggles. So I didn't even think enough about all the elements of transitional pedagogy because I was grappling with, how do I do this? And the whole concept of a design team, well, from my perspective, didn't exist.
Yep.
Maybe officially there was one, but I felt so lonely and did it on my own. And as a result of that, I have to say, quite traumatic experience. I didn't think I would survive. I have had to rewrite that unit to make myself happy multiple times.
Yeah.
Now I'm happy with it, but it was not pleasant.
Yeah.
Doing this creative arts unit was terrific. By this stage, I knew how to turn on the computer, but more than that, I had met so many useful and helpful people, and I've learned an enormous amount. So do you want to ask me questions, or shall I tell you actually what the difference was?
Well, if you want to just start by telling me the difference, I guess what I'm interested is what lessons did you learn between the first time you started and what made it so much more smoother now?
Okay, so the first smooth was knowing people at the university and using their expertise.
Yep.
But the thing I think I learned the most was that I had to move away from traditional frontal teaching, and I have done teaching, as I said, for decades. And not that frontal teaching was my major approach, but I really, if I'm honest with myself, had this belief that I knew the answer, and all you had to do was listen to me and you'd get the information. And really, having taught BC English and stuff, I knew the answer. Listen to me, do what I tell you, and you'll do okay in year 12.
Absolutely.
But I've learned that I actually don't know the answers, and that students working collaboratively are so powerful. And I love going into, I hate Zoom, but I do love going into breakout rooms and seeing students genuinely collaborate and learn from one another. And I think that's something that really changed in the way in which I designed the unit. That collaboration was number one, and students being the voice and me being the guide. I know all this stuff we talk about teachers facilitate, but I don't think that it really was embedded in my psyche until more recently, after that first unit. I've also learned, and thanks to first year college and some terrific staff and some great PD, how to think about assessment very differently.
Yep.
Because of course my training is in high school English, and each of the assessment tasks is very separate.
Yeah.
It's over, right? We don't do any more language analysis, it's done.
Yep.
But I've learned to design assessment tasks that build on one another. So assessment 1 is the foundation for assessment 2, which gives you the tools to do assessment 3. And I found that empowering for students and empowering for me, because you're watching growth.
Absolutely.
And they can see how one idea links to the next. So that's embedded in my new unit, and I think really quite successfully. Though of course I'm still tweaking it.
Of course.
And what else did I learn? I learned, I think, the importance of scaffolding.
Yeah.
Which I have to say I am using more now in my private tutoring, because I still do tutoring at Year 12 English, is the fear of the blank page.
Yeah.
And the need to help students take the steps to get beyond that panic of the first page, that blank page. And it's really important, because once you get them across the threshold, they produce work of a really good standard.
Yeah.
So I think more scaffolding, lots of collaboration, clever assessment tasks, and the power of feed forward rather than feedback.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting to hear the parallels of your experience, saying how students are frightened of a blank page, and almost mirrors our experiences of coming in with a blank unit and having no idea where to start. And sometimes it's actually just getting that first iteration out so you can start tweaking it to make improvements. I definitely echo your sentiments of the co-collaboration. I too remember sitting there learning about trusting the students and thinking, but what if they get it wrong? Like, how can I relinquish all my power to them? But I agree with you. I've had similar experiences in where once you actually relinquish that power, you realize how much students can do and how much knowledge they bring with them. So, sorry, you were going to say?
No, I sorry, I was saying no, yes, I agree totally that students bring an enormous amount of knowledge. And most recently, in the first offering at this creativity in the arts, listening to students, quite a few mature age students, some of whom worked in the arts, but others worked in disparate areas, not even to do with education, had so much to offer and share that I was quite humbled by their comments. And indeed, I have added things that they've suggested. And I got to tell you, I did this little research project of my own.
Awesome.
I got the really strong students to sit with me after class when they got back assessment 1 and tell me to critique assessment 1 and what could have been improved and what was difficult to understand. And I learned from them and I tweaked that assessment task and I think it's really good now. So learning that the source of knowledge is not totally with me. And I suppose it's not that I actually believed it, but when you have year 12 students who are so insecure, they sit there with their pens poised writing down what you say.
Absolutely.
That's how you get into that mindset.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely understand that. And I think what you've just explained then is the perfect capturing of what scholarship is. And that is that education is an ongoing transformative process where we constantly need to be evaluating and tweaking what we do. And this is perfect evidence right here that by talking to the students, you've enhanced your assessment practices for the next lot of students. And that's exactly what we're all about here. So based on your experiences so far with your new unit, which I know is only running for the second time right now, what aspects did you find most engaging in that first iteration?
Did I find most engaging?
Or did the students find most engaging?
Well, I think they found the concept of using creative approaches to teaching content quite mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Where you say, okay, how are you going to embed drama in teaching the planets? So they were quite taken aback by that whole idea, but that's not really about the strategy or the design. That's the whole premise for the unit. I think I began because of advice of colleagues or suggestions from colleagues. I began every session with a drama game, and after the break, we did a drama game. So Dewey's method of learning by doing, instead of speaking about them, actually doing them, that's worked really, really well.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. And I sometimes it's just, the showing, not telling, actually having them get up and experience what's going on really almost shifts their mindset into a doing approach as well, rather than a passive receiving of it.
It's been a challenge on Zoom, but we've actually been playing drama games on Zoom. And that certainly fixes those students who don't have their cameras on. I say, no camera, you can't play because it's about eye contact. And, we've got some games when we're passing imaginary objects. Oh, I can't see you, you can't play.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's a level of creativity that I need to steal from you because I'm still begging them to have their cameras on. So just to round out, Michelle, I'm just interested in what is something that you think people that are teaching first year university students should be more mindful of? And this can be in the design, the conceptualization, or the delivery to students. You've touched on a couple of things so far, but what would your take-home piece of advice be?
Creating a sense of connection and belonging.
Yep.
I know your major, your area is psychology, and I have not studied psychology, but I know that if you don't feel that you matter,
absolutely,
it's not always a motivation to keep coming. And I think first year college really has this correct. The small groups mean that if you're not there, somebody notices actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful. At university, my own experience at university, I remember, and I've got children living in this house who are at another university. They don't have that experience at all, and I feel that is a strength. When somebody knows that their presence is noted and noticed, when we can learn students' names and really engage, then they feel as if they're important and their contribution is important. So I think that is super important for transition pedagogy, but also that comment about scaffolding.
Yeah.
That they've come out of school where they did think the teacher knew the answer and they were prepared to write down everything he or she said. The need to scaffold them and to build their confidence, because I think it is all about confidence building. Once you feel like I've got my head around the idea and the way the operation works, I can actually manage the material.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I know for me, even as a staff member, that sense of belonging, I don't think is only for the students, it's also for us. And I think there would be a lot of people who have been teaching in the past year that have struggled with not having that feedback from students because cameras have been off or we haven't been able to see body language and things like that. And so it's hard to know how you're being perceived.
Well, I do have a strategy for that if you want.
Oh, tell us your secrets.
Well, you can see me now, perhaps the podcast people can't, but I turn around and I face my back
Yep.
to the students.
Yep.
And I say, you're going to be educators. That's what it's going to be like if you teach with your camera off. It's like teaching to somebody's back. I can't connect with you.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And it has 70% success rate. And then, of course, that you can't play the drum game if the camera isn't on helps a little bit.
Amazing. Oh, hopefully we're not going to need those secrets for too much longer. And I bet you are itching to do this unit in the classroom live. I think it will be amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. You have really provided us with some excellent information, and it's great to hear how your unit and mindset towards designing and delivering first year content has evolved since the conception of the first year college. So I think you've set a very high and interesting standard for the people that are to follow you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat, even though it's on Zoom.
Yes, one day we'll be face to face. Thank you very much, Michelle.